There are places on Earth where the landscape feels charged with story, where myth and reality blur so completely that separating them seems almost impossible. Deep in the Western Atlantic, a stretch of ocean has carried a reputation for centuries. Whispered about in taverns, written into pulp novels, and feared by sailors who claim to have felt its power firsthand. This is the Bermuda Triangle. A patch of water, if you can call something that size a patch, stretching from Miami in Florida, out to Bermuda, and down to Puerto Rico, then back again in a rough triangle. Inside lies a maritime graveyard, thousands of ships, hundreds of planes, and tens of thousands of lives. Some were claimed by storms, others by human error, but in many cases there were no warnings, no mayday calls, no wreckage left to explain what happened. For centuries, the Bermuda Triangle has been called a graveyard of the Atlantic, a phrase that captures both the danger and the mystique. It's easy to dismiss such ideas as folklore, the stuff of ghost stories passed between sailors on long voyages. But when you look closer, when you trace the history of disappearances, the eyewitness accounts of towering walls of water, the modern science uncovering forces in the ocean, we're only beginning to understand, you realize the legend isn't built on nothing. This is the story of the Bermuda Triangle, a place where folklore meets oceanography, where ships vanish in broad daylight, where the sea itself seems to rise up and devour the unprepared. Whispers of a malevolent sea. The origins of the Bermuda Triangle legend are older than the name itself. Long before American pilots or cargo captains drew lines on maps, this part of the Atlantic carried a dark reputation. When Christopher Columbus sailed through these waters in 1492, his logbook noted strange compass readings and lights dancing on the horizon. He described a great flame of fire that crashed into the sea, likely a meteor. And days later, a glowing light appeared in the distance before vanishing. To men of the 15th century, these were not scientific anomalies, but omens, signs that this ocean carried a supernatural edge. Later sailors added their own layers of myth. Some swore the triangle was cursed, home to sea monsters, or even gateways to other realms. Others spoke of rogue waves, monstrous walls of water that rose from calm seas to obliterate ships. For centuries, such tales were filed under sailors' yarn, stories too wild to take seriously. And yet, they persisted, Shackleton's brush with the impossible. The most famous early eyewitness encounter came not from a merchant sailor, but from one of history's most celebrated explorers, Sir Ernest Shackleton. In 1919, aboard the steamship Quest, Shackleton crossed through waters within the triangle. On a seemingly calm night, his crew recorded being struck by a single towering wave, a wall of water that appeared from nowhere, dwarfing their ship. For men who had survived Antarctica's crushing ice and endless storms, the wave was unlike anything they had ever seen. Shackleton himself, though weakened by illness at the time, noted its sheer unnatural size. It rose high above the deck, then crashed down with a force that should have broken the vessel apart. Somehow, the Quest survived. At the time, scientists dismissed Shackleton's account. The idea of a wave rising 80, 90, or even 100 feet from a calm sea was considered fantasy. Waves that large, it was thought, could only come from hurricanes or tsunamis. Sailors who spoke of them were thought to be exaggerating, or perhaps confusing storm surges with reality. The rogue wave became a kind of nautical boogeyman, convenient for ghost stories, but impossible in the eyes of science. But the men on Shackleton's ship weren't fanciful storytellers. They were seasoned mariners, trained explorers, eyewitnesses whose testimony demanded respect. And they were not the only ones. Vanishings without a trace. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, reports piled up of ships that left port and never arrived at their destination. Wooden schooners carrying coal, steamships loaded with cargo, fishing boats crewed by hardy men of the Bahamas. Some were last seen sailing into calm seas, others vanished during storms, but all shared one thing in common: the ocean gave back little to no evidence. One of the eeriest cases was the Ellen Austin in 1881. The American schooner encountered an abandoned vessel drifting aimlessly in the Triangle. Its sails were set, cargo intact, but not a single crew member remained aboard. The captain of the Ellen Austin ordered some of his own men to sail the derelict back to port. But within days, both ships were separated by a storm. When the abandoned vessel was sighted again, it was once more crewless. The relief crew gone without explanation. Other cases were more final. In 1918, the USS Cyclops, a massive Navy collier carrying 10,000 tons of manganese ore, vanished somewhere between Barbados and Baltimore. No distress call, no wreckage, no oil slick. She was crewed by 309 men, making it the single largest non-combat loss of life in U.S. naval history. President Woodrow Wilson would later say, "Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship." Stories like these cemented the Bermuda Triangle's reputation. Not merely dangerous, but uncanny. The ocean claimed ships everywhere in the world. Storms sank whalers in the Pacific, icebergs ripped open liners in the North Atlantic. But in the Triangle, it seemed to happen in silence, as though the sea itself reached up and swallowed vessels whole. Science plays catch up. For decades, sailors' accounts of freak waves and strange disappearances were dismissed by scientists as exaggeration or fabrication. Oceanography in the early 20th century was in its infancy, and the tools to measure the open sea were crude at best. What couldn't be explained was simply waved off. But by the mid-20th century, the evidence became harder to ignore. Merchant captains began filing more precise logs. Naval records showed losses in the same regions, under similar conditions. And insurance companies, who had to calculate the risk of insuring ships crossing these waters, began to notice patterns. The breakthrough came not in the Triangle itself, but off the coast of Norway in 1995. At the Drowner oil platform, a massive wave slammed into the rig on New Year's Day. The wave measured 84 feet from trough to crest in otherwise moderate seas. Unlike Shackleton's account or sailors' tales, this wave left behind proof, sensor data, photographs, physical damage. It was the first time science had undeniable evidence of what sailors had always claimed. Rogue waves were real. With that single event, the impossible became fact. Waves that rose like watery skyscrapers from calm seas were not legends but part of the ocean's natural behavior. The question shifted from "are they real?" to "how often do they happen?" And more chillingly, where are they most likely to strike? The Bermuda Triangle was near the top of that list. The Triangle as a perfect storm. What makes the Bermuda Triangle so dangerous isn't just its size or the storms that sweep across it, but its geography. Warm water from the Gulf Stream collides with cold currents from the north. The seafloor is a jagged patchwork of deep trenches, shallows, and steep drop-offs. Hurricanes roar through every summer and autumn. These ingredients combine to make the region one of the most volatile bodies of water on Earth. Ships entering seemingly calm seas can encounter sudden squalls, violent shifts in current, and yes, rogue waves. In fact, satellite data has shown clusters of rogue wave activity forming precisely within the Triangle's borders. To the sailor of the past, these were the wrath of gods or the work of curses. To the scientist of today, they are physics in motion, but no less terrifying. A cargo ship built to withstand 30-foot swells can be rolled onto its side and snapped in half by a rogue wave twice that size. An aircraft flying at low altitude can be caught in an updraft or microburst, forcing it into the ocean. The triangle is not a portal to another dimension. It doesn't need to be. The forces at work here are powerful enough on their own. Flight into silence. The sea is not the triangle's only hunting ground. In the age of aviation, it began to claim planes. The most famous case was Flight 19, a squadron of 5 Navy bombers on a training run in December 1945. The mission was routine, a triangular navigation course over the Atlantic before returning to base in Fort Lauderdale. Weather conditions were normal, the pilots experienced, the planes well-maintained. But less than 3 hours into the exercise, radio communications began to unravel. The flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, reported that his compass was malfunctioning. He believed they were over the Florida Keys, when in reality, they were drifting far out into the Atlantic. The other pilots, growing increasingly concerned, radioed suggestions to turn west, but Taylor insisted on continuing east. Radio operators on land listened in as the transmissions grew fainter, more panicked, until finally, silence. Despite one of the largest search and rescue efforts in naval history, no trace of Flight 19 was ever found. Adding to the mystery, one of the rescue planes sent to search for them, a PBM Mariner carrying 13 crew, exploded in midair less than an hour after takeoff, vanishing into the ocean without a trace. For the public, Flight 19 cemented the Triangle's reputation. This was no storm-battered schooner in the age of sail. These were modern aircraft, flown by disciplined servicemen, vanishing on a calm day off the coast of Florida. The case became so famous, it inspired pulp magazines, conspiracy theories, even blockbuster films. Skeptics argued the squadron had simply become lost, run out of fuel, and ditched into the sea. But no debris was ever found. Not a wing, not a life vest, not a single body. For families of the lost, the Triangle became more than a story. It was the reason their loved ones never came home. Folklore meets fact. The Bermuda Triangle is often portrayed as a modern invention, a media creation from the 1950s. And it's true, the name itself was popularized in magazine articles and books. But the deeper folklore goes back centuries, shaped by every culture that sailed these waters. Bahamian fishermen told stories of the blue holes, underwater caves said to stretch endlessly into the earth. Some swore they were bottomless, pulling down boats that strayed too close. West African traditions brought by enslaved people included tales of spirits in the water, vengeful presences that punished those who disrespected the sea. European sailors added their own myths. The Flying Dutchman, a ghost ship doomed to wander forever. Sea serpents that could coil around a vessel and drag it under. By the 20th century, these older legends fused with new fears. Magnetic anomalies that disrupted compasses, methane gas bubbling from the seafloor to sink ships, even alien abductions. The Bermuda Triangle became a blank canvas onto which every generation painted its own fears. And yet, hidden within the exaggerations are kernels of truth. Magnetic anomalies do exist, though not unique to the Triangle. Methane gas can erupt from the seafloor, though rarely in concentrations large enough to sink a ship. And while aliens may not be responsible, the real forces at work here are no less dramatic. The science of monsters. The 1995 Dropner wave changed everything. Suddenly, the stories of Shackleton, of countless sailors who swore they had seen walls of water rising from nowhere, were no longer dismissed. Oceanographers began hunting rogue waves in earnest, and what they found was unsettling. Satellite data revealed that rogue waves could reach heights of over 100 feet, even in relatively calm seas. They formed when multiple smaller waves aligned perfectly, their energy stacking to create a single towering wall. Unlike tsunamis, which spread over vast distances, rogue waves are short, violent, and devastating, appearing in minutes and vanishing just as quickly. Studies suggested these waves were far more common than once thought. Instead of once-in-a-millennium events, they might occur every few years in heavily trafficked shipping lanes. Insurance data backed it up. Ships described as lost without a trace often disappeared in areas where rogue waves were most likely. And where were those hotspots? The North Atlantic, the South African coast, the southern tip of South America, and yes, the Bermuda Triangle. A graveyard on the seafloor. To understand the triangle, you also need to look beneath the waves. The ocean floor here is not flat, but a fractured landscape of ridges, cliffs, and trenches. The Puerto Rico Trench at the triangle's southern edge plunges over 27,000 feet, the deepest point in the Atlantic. Just north, the seafloor rises sharply into shallow banks and reefs, a hazard to unwary sailors. This violent topography amplifies the power of the sea. Storm swells hitting steep underwater cliffs can rebound, creating chaotic wave patterns. Sudden shifts in current can push ships off course. The seafloor is also prone to landslides, which can trigger tsunamis. And then there are the infamous blue holes, underwater caves that stretch deep into the limestone bedrock, capable of swallowing divers and small boats alike. It's little wonder so many ships left no wreckage. In waters this deep, a vessel can sink beyond reach in minutes. For much of history, there was no technology capable of finding them. Even today, searching thousands of square miles of ocean floor is a monumental task, searching for patterns. Modern science has tried to bring order to the mystery. Studies of shipping records suggest the Bermuda Triangle does not have a statistically higher rate of disappearances than other heavily trafficked oceans. The vast majority of losses can be explained by storms, human error, or mechanical failure. And yet, the perception remains. Why? Because the cases that do happen here are so often unusual. Ships vanishing without distress calls. Planes disappearing on clear days. Eyewitness accounts of phenomena science once denied. Part of the answer lies in probability. The Triangle is one of the busiest maritime corridors in the world. Ships funnel through from the Gulf of Mexico, the Panama Canal, the eastern seaboard, and Europe. More traffic means more accidents, but part of it is also genuine. This is one of the most dynamic environments on Earth, where storms, currents, and waves conspire to create conditions sailors elsewhere might never encounter. In other words, the Bermuda Triangle isn't uniquely cursed, it's uniquely alive. Human fear, human fascination. The legend of the Bermuda Triangle says as much about us as it does about the sea. Humans are storytellers. When confronted with tragedy without explanation, we reach for myth. A schooner found empty on a calm day. The crew vanished. A squadron of planes disappearing mid-flight. These become mysteries because we crave answers, and when none are available, we invent them. But unlike myths of dragons or witches, the Triangle's power endures because it is tethered to real danger. The sea really does take ships. Storms really do rise out of nowhere. Waves really do tower like cliffs, striking without warning. To sail through the Bermuda Triangle is not to step into another dimension. It is to cross through one of the most volatile and unpredictable oceans on Earth. Can we predict the Triangle? Today, scientists are developing tools that might finally tame the legend. Satellites can track wave patterns across entire oceans. Supercomputers can model the stacking of swells that creates rogue waves. Sensors on oil rigs, buoys, and ships record data in real time, feeding into prediction systems. Some researchers believe we may soon be able to forecast rogue wave conditions the same way we predict hurricanes. If so, the age-old sailor's fear of the sea suddenly rising against him may one day be replaced by warnings on a screen. But until then, the risk remains. The Bermuda Triangle may never be fully explained. But perhaps that is the point. To erase the mystery entirely would be to strip the sea of something essential. Mariners need awe. They need respect for forces beyond their control. Without it, complacency sets in. And complacency at sea is deadly. Closing thoughts. A sea that remembers. So what is the Bermuda Triangle? A haunted stretch of ocean? A portal to another world? Or simply a place where science and myth collide? In truth, it is all of these and none. The triangle is dangerous because the sea itself is dangerous. It is mysterious because the ocean, even in the 21st century, still hides more secrets than it reveals. It endures in our imagination because it represents something we've never conquered. Nature, at its most unpredictable. Ships will continue to cross it. Planes will continue to fly above it. Most will make it through unscathed, never glimpsing the fury beneath. But every so often, when the weather turns or the waves align, the triangle reminds us that we are small, that for all our technology, our maps, our satellites, we are still at the mercy of a planet that can change its face in minutes. The Bermuda Triangle is not cursed. It doesn't need to be. Its danger is far simpler and far more awe-inspiring. It is the sea, vast, merciless, beautiful. And sometimes it swallows what enters, leaving behind only silence.